Well, building on the spiritual renaissance for Bharatvarsh, I was very, very happy listening to this session personally, because I have huge interest in such writings, and rightly mentioned by Hindol and so many others, a lot of reading has to happen to understand the true essence and the soul of a nation like Bharat. And as we salute 75 years of Azadi Ki Amrit Mahotsav at Arth, a culture fest, I'd like to thank all of you who are listening to us. Arth, the Culture Fest, has been co-powered by Greenply, India's first zero-emission plywood, Macho Hint, and Parachute Advanced Gold special partner, Protinex. Ladies and gentlemen, now we move on to something which is very close to my heart. I'm sure it's very close to your heart as well. It's past lunchtime, or just about lunchtime in many households, and I'm sure you are, you're eating your lunch and watching us online, on your iPads or your mobile phones, on your television. The next forum is to understand the culture of Indian cuisine. And fascinating as it may sound, it's important to revisit, reconnect, re-explore, and rediscover the roots and the resurgence of Indian cuisine through the roadmap of a country called India. And for that, we have joining us online, Sonal Ved, who's a Mumbai-based cookbook author, cookery show host, and a journalist. Chef Kunal Kapur, who needs no introduction. He's an Indian celebrity chef and a very, very popular media personality. And of course, my friend from Delhi, Abhijit Iyer-Mitra, who's a defense economist, a senior fellow at the Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies, and absolutely a fascinating public thinker. Can I invite Abhijit Iyer-Mitra on stage? And I'm Sujoy Prasad Chatterjee, an interdisciplinary artist from Calcutta, hosting Arth for the next 2 days. I'll be joining them in conversation on this very, very important aspect of cuisine, culture and cuisine. Thank you very much. Sometimes I feel that playing characters on screen are easier than playing a kind of duality that exists in our lives. And the duality that exists in cuisine brings me to this very important aspect of how do we look at the history and trajectory that cuisine has gone through, and especially Indian cuisine, that's what we're talking about. And of course, there's a very strong cultural history of cuisine that kind of pre-exists, and of course, a part of which has gone through evolution. I'm sure, our viewers who are watching this forum would like to know about the history. Would you throw a little light on that and then come back to the evolution?
Sure. So, one of the things about cuisine is it's such an important part of culture. In India, we don't see it as that, but say in France or Italy, they take it so seriously. They have the appellation d'origine contrôlée and the DOCG and all of that to, label, very meticulously go into the archaeological record and pinpoint. The problem in India is we have two different streams. One that sort of opposes nationalism and sees any attempt at originizing anything into India as very dangerous. Yeah. And on the other, you have a sort of very terrible approach to archaeology, especially botanical archaeology,
yes,
which becomes very problematic. So if you look at it, there have been many waves of influences that have come in. I think every cuisine,
of course,
has that influence in it. So, for example, what would Indian food be, say, without tomatoes, right?
Yeah.
But which comes after the pre-Columbian exchange. For that matter, what would Western food be without vanilla, which comes from the Americas as well? I think the earliest recipe we have that included tomatoes, chili, and chocolate, they were all in the same recipe, was for sacrificed human thighs
Yes.
of the Aztecs.
Yes.
So, unfortunately, it's become something of a binary. Archaeology is nationalistic, and therefore you can't do food archaeology. And I find that very problematic because there is, nationalism is a sort of narrative that's built on facts, or sometimes a lack of facts, but it's very essential to get to the facts in the first place. So for me, the history in the clearest possible terms is latest debate of biryani.
Yes, of course.
I see all these people writing about biryani who have never actually been to Turkmenistan, Farghana, Uzbekistan or Iran or Afghanistan, because if you actually go there, which I did, I've extensively toured that entire area for about 2 years now, you find that there's nothing like the biryani here. Right, in Iran, it's all about putting the rice at the bottom. The first part, which is the absorption bit, and then the second, which is the fluffing up in the dum, what we call. That the Iranians do. In Uzbekistan, you don't have that part. It's just cooking it along with water and meat, pure absorption technique. In India, it's very sophisticated. You put the meat at the bottom where it's roasting, hence Farsi biryan. But the second part of the cooking of the rice, the sort of fluffing up, that happens on top of it, that is extremely unique.
It's almost like minestrone, I mean, the way minestrone is presented in India, it's not what minestrone would be in Italy.
Exactly. Well, a minestrone was whatever you had left over.
Yeah.
You just throw it.
Yeah.
What I find amazing, even in Italian cooking today, if you go to all these Italian TV shows, they'll say, oh, you can't put in that much garlic, Plus, you have to slit the garlic open and the germ of the garlic, that little green spout.
Yeah.
You have to remove that. And I'm thinking, are you nuts? Like 30 years ago, if you went to Italy, I still have some videos of my grandmother. She went there for a honeymoon in 1938.
Okay.
There is such copious quantities of garlic used. It was like 5-6 tablespoons of garlic for one person.
Oh my God, okay.
And I'm thinking, you guys are such wankers. You've just made this up because in those days, having garlic breath was a good thing.
Yes.
Because dental hygiene wasn't that good. So it was better to smell of garlic than it was of something else.
Absolutely. Fabulous. I mean, Abhijit has just kick-started this forum. Coming to Sonal, is she with us already? Fabulous. So Sonal, if you can hear me, you've been, writing cookbooks, and you're a cookery show host. What, according to you, has been, celebrated as traditions, and something that you aspire and you swear by, that okay, this tradition, this aspect of Indian cooking is culturally rich, and possibly something which is possibly not originated in our culture, as rightly mentioned by Abhijit, something which has traveled throughout. What rests with you?
I think I would say spices. I feel like spices are celebrated when you move outside of India, and that is what Indian food is recognized by. And also when you say that, there is this conception that all spices are Indian, but that's not true, right? Like you just pointed out the fact about chili, that in itself is not Indian. And I feel like the representation it has got internationally is that it's Indian until Indian cooks started talking a lot about how it's not Indian, and history books like this started talking about it. So I feel like that's the aspect of that I see explored much more than anything else, the usage of spices.
Okay, I must have been, as they say, lost in translation. No, lost in the big bag world of internet. But at Arth, that we are trying to rediscover and reconnect our roots, we have Chef Kunal Kapur with us, who's a celebrated chef internationally, and somewhere who also represents our country in such a big way. Chef, what, according to you, is still celebrated as traditional Indian cuisine when you travel worldwide with our cuisine?
Well, with Indian food and Indian cuisine, it's really very vast. So I think the first recollection of anybody from outside India is the typical restaurant food or the neighborhood Indian restaurant in their country, what they usually find, which could be anywhere from a humble samosa to butter chicken and naan and tandoori chicken. And a lot of my Gora friends think that this is what we eat at home, which actually is not true. I think globally there is an awareness about Indian food. There is a certain level of acceptance, but it is right now at a very nascent stage, or at a stage where people have a preconceived notion about that this is what Indian food is because that is what they were exposed to, as opposed to now it opening up in a big way, especially thanks but no thanks to pandemic. There have been a renewed interest with Indian food in India, which also leads to a very renewed interest of the world looking at Indian food and spices, whether it's the humble turmeric or the kada that really went viral in the last 2 years. So obviously it opens doors, and people across the world ask questions, the right questions, why and how much and when did it start? And India has been, has always been a hotbed for spices like Sonal had just mentioned, and the world came to India to add flavor or to add spice to their regular, if I can say, very dull and boring food. And India kind of became the hub, the space, the subcontinent where everybody wanted to have a slice of the trade in order to establish those trade routes. And obviously with trade routes, the economic boom that happened, not just in India, but around the world as well. So we inherently are a country which have extremely learned people. In fact, I was listening to your previous conversation also about Bankim Chandra Chatterjee and Rabindranath Tagore and all those intellectuals. And even talk about food, when you talk about spices or when you talk about Ayurveda, it's very interesting that the earlier forms of medicine were always through food. And I'm a very strong, a person of a very strong notion that Indian food, no matter what it was, the current day food that we still cook at home was developed by Hakims and Veds. They were actually done by doctors who prescribe certain spice in a certain season based on a body type to a certain age group of people so that it benefits them. तो ये मसाला जाएगा, आपको ये दिन में खाना है, इतनी मात्रा में खाना है, इतने बजे खाना है, इस तरीके से इसका सेवन होगा, which is a very documented fact which we loosely, everybody including me, throw around as Ayurveda में लिखा है. But understand how does Indian food is one of the most complex cuisine in the world, if not one of these, maybe it's already number one. When I say complex, in terms of number of ingredients, you spoke about Italian food, it's garlic, good quality olive oil, a nice meat, a pasta, herb, maybe some cheese. These 5 things will easily pass off or will be used in at least 30 to 50 Italian dishes. But a simple, humble, so to speak, a rasam, for example, requires at least 12 different spices and 10 more different ingredients. Now, one of the reasons is there is a reason why every spice has its role and comes into a recipe. And this is nothing but pure genius of from the people from this part of the world. And they kind of earlier realized how well we are connected to the nature and how close we are to the nature, and our dependency on nature is prime. Obviously, we have watered down our food. We have picked up on different aspects of food and culinary from across the world, which is absolutely fine because food cannot be constricted and kept in a box and say, "Bhai, ab ho gaya, this is Indian food." No. Any food, whether Indian or not Indian, just like humans, they evolve. Just like us, the food also evolves. जो हम 100 साल पहले खाते थे, वो आज नहीं खाते. जो 100 साल पहले हम थे, वो भी तो नहीं है हम आज. So, जो भी context में लेना होता है ना, it has to be properly, intellectually thought and then used. जैसे हल्दी खा लो, हल्दी खा लो, हल्दी खा लो, हल्दी खा लो, उससे immunity बढ़ेगी. So in this entire pandemic, one had a lot of spare time at hand. I
Yes.
spoke to a couple of my doctor friends. They said the best way a turmeric will help you is through slow absorption, which means eating a lot of turmeric may not help you, but keeping turmeric in your mouth on the sides where your absorption of turmeric is the most will really help. So there's a whole lot of knowledge at this point of time, and it is very dispersed. But slowly, gradually, we have started documenting Indian food, whether it is through websites, whether it's through home videos, whether it's through culinary shows and travel shows. So the process has started, so to say.
It has. Chef, I'm going to take a cue from your point. Very well thought of and very well put forward. As I imagine not to salivate over my favorite foods being talked about, Abhijit, how difficult it is. You've just had lunch. I haven't had lunch also. But coming back to you, Abhijit, we just had a session before this about the spiritual renaissance of Bharatvarsh. I think cuisine is so important, if not one of the most important elements in talking about a transformation or renaissance in a country. You rightly mentioned that, you actually mentioned how intricate and how important food or cuisine has been a part of our civilization. Coming from that point of view to absolutely modern day, a contemporary Indian who goes out to work, and of course, dal chawal being his comfort food for all of us. How has food traveled through this pandemic, and how has diets changed? What do you see with your friends, and what has been the generic consensus about food among the countrymen now? What do you think about it?
So, my great discovery personally during the pandemic was there's a reason everybody, not just in India, but also the Goras love dal chawal.
Okay.
Right. They have two complementary compounds. I forget their names. I'm sorry. I'm a humanities graduate. I'm not a science graduate. But if you go check out the videos that America's test kitchens, imagine even our culture we have to find out about from Americans.
Of course.
Each one has a compound that gets activated by the compound in the other, which is why dal chawal is something you can make anywhere from, say, a Patagonian tribal to a Alaskan, Eskimo to love. Now, for me, the real journey during the pandemic was techniques. And I saw that in a lot of YouTube videos as well. Because, the number of YouTube chefs went up exponentially during lockdown and things.
Of course it did.
And for me, the travel was the technique. What we call maa ka pyar.
Yeah.
Maa ka pyar is technique.
Yes.
Because what mommy is doing is, she's like, my son or my daughter should eat really well. So she's paying that extra care and attention to technique. And what I've seen, very encouragingly so, is that we've started focusing, and I'm being very generic here, it's just the kernel that I'm seeing happening slowly, is that we're recognizing that India's contribution is not just in spices, but it's also in fats, but most importantly in techniques. And when we say techniques, let me give you the two most important techniques that the West loves so much. Caramelization. Caramelization of meat, the Maillard reaction.
Of course. Yeah.
Now, they do a simple caramelization, which is, either with the steak in the frying pan, or, with the onion for a French onion soup where you sweat it down for hours on end. We do it very differently. We actually take the onion with the birista, the fried brown onion.
Yeah.
We take it much further than the West does in terms of developing the caramel in it. In the meat, what the West loves, that, that brown finish on the steak.
Yes.
And this is something I read almost 20 years back.
Or maybe a shepherd's pie.
Yeah. For me, it was something I read 20 years back in this, the famous book, Cookbook of the Maharajas by Maharaja Digvijay Singh.
Yes.
There is a recipe there called Korma Asif Jahi where he says bhunao. Now, what is bhunao? You fry the mutton till it's totally brown, but then you add a liquid to, disperse all the caramel. Right. And then you fry it again for a second time, so you're developing even more caramelization. And then finally, a third time you do it. And the kind of caramelly flavors it develops is intense. So, it takes Maillard reaction. I think Indians do the Maillard reaction better than any technique in the West. The problem is we don't know how to market it. When I cook for my Italian friends, I go there, I have a house in Italy, so I go there every summer. The only thing I do is टमाटर को पकाओ तेल में. But before that, you make birista out of it. You crush it like you do for a korma and put it at the end, and they're all like, oh my God, Abhijit, what is this sauce? And I'm like, it's just onion. There's no garlic. It's just olive oil, onion, and tomato. Why don't we get this flavor? These are things we need to be selling. And what I found really encouraging during COVID was that a lot of these young, up-and-coming YouTubers were actually going into techniques rather than ingredients, because ingredient is just a checklist. You just tick it off and that's it. It's the technique that, for me, makes a cuisine.
No, absolutely. And, that kind of brings me to a small question for Sonal, who is actually a writer on food in so many ways. So, Sonal, the culture of cuisine in India has also been recipe books. Except for my mother, who recently passed away last year. Whenever I used to go and appreciate her cooking, she used to say, I used to ask her that, I'm sure you have a recipe book somewhere hidden, which you don't share with us, and you cook brilliantly. She used to say, no, it's the flavor and the taste that works. And she really did not have a recipe book. But tell me, Sonal, how has a resurgent Indian culture, how is the resurgent Indian culture looking at cookbooks and recipe books today?
So I feel like about this subject is that, a lot of times there's this question about who is reading cookbooks and, is anyone even interested in cookbooks and things like that. But I feel like publications like New York Times, there's a reason why they have like a list of best cookbooks every season, is because there is interest for that kind of documentation of recipes. And the difference that I see between, cooking out of a YouTube video versus cooking out of a cookbook is the difference between is like going to a restaurant or taking. One is so full of experience, which is what I feel with cookbooks. It kind of elevates the cooking process because you're connecting with the author, what their thought process is and all of that. And one is just following what they're doing on YouTube, doing their actions, which works for certain cooks who are just kind of learning and they need to get their technique right. And that's why I feel that cookbooks are important. But when it comes to Indian cuisine, now I think the trick is that there is this whole idea of andas, right? We are obsessed with cooking with andas. That is what separates Indian cooking from any other culture in the world. And to get that right, filing tiffin, and it was 500 recipes, and a lot of them were contributed recipes from various home chefs and cooks and all of that. They would not give me, proper methods, especially home chefs, because they're like, sorry, that's how I cook, and that's how my mother cooks, and that's how my grandmother cooks, or that's how my dad cooks. So, or that's how my Maharaj cooks, if it was a Gujarati. So I feel like that andaz is what separates us. And if somebody is going to take the effort to convert those into proper, how many grams and all of that, which I had to do with tiffin, then I think that's what makes an Indian cookbook a cookbook.
I'm just sharing an observation with Kunal, who's a master chef and who actually curates cuisine. Kunal, my question to you is, as a part of culture playing an important role in cuisine, there's a word that we often use with Indian cuisine, exotic. In contemporary India, looking at a very important aspect of cuisine is the politics of Indian cuisine. I will come to Abhijit for deeper insights, but beginning with you, I want to understand how is the politics of Indian cuisine doing in the West today? How exotic? Is it still exotic, or is the West looking at the culture or the assimilation in a different way? What has been your experience?
I think even before the West, we ourselves are not really completely exposed to our own food. When we say Indian, it's a very broad spectrum. It's a very massive palette, and I personally believe one lifetime is small enough to sample the complete Indian fare. But interestingly, Indian food is one of the oldest cuisines in the world, and about 4,500-year-old curry possibly is the oldest curry recorded, which was excavated or extracted from the excavations from this place called Farmana in Haryana, which was part of the Mohenjo-daro excavations. And wahan par unko ek pot mila. They did that starch grain analysis and they found out that bangan, haldi, namak, tel or adrak or lasan milakar kuch curry bani. So this is the oldest dated curry that we have on record, which is about roughly 4,500 years old, which is the bangan curry. Now, not many of us even know about this. So we should not have high hopes about the West kind of understanding Indian food and Indian nuances. One of the biggest change that I've seen in my career, when I started out about 21, 22 years back as a trainee chef, whenever there was an order for a gora, it used to be written gore ka khana hai on the kitchen order ticket, which meant ke less spicy. And now I see a huge change. They say, don't change the food for me. Keep it the way you would eat it. Keep it the way you would prepare at home. So I see this change, but on a very larger perspective in terms of commercial restaurants. There are two aspects. One is the commercial side of food where, let's say, in the outside world, you go out and eat. And one is that it is so popular that you are cooking it at home. For example, Italian food, like mom would cook Italian food. Now, she cooks her own version of Punjabi Italian because that's what she knows. But I cook Italian food. I have friends who are not chefs who cook Mexican food at home. So look at the amount of depth or the reach of this international food that वो हमारी हिंदुस्तानी किचन में आ गई है. क्या हिंदुस्तानी खाना उनकी किचन तक गया है around the world? I'm not so sure. So there are these pockets that are really becoming popular. There are these countries or continents that are really picking up on Indian food with their vibe, but it is still pretty limited. But having said that, there are restaurants who have done some fantastic food, who have also modernized Indian food, which becomes the window for a lot of people to come try and not get afraid of Indian cuisine because of the preconceived notions about khana will be oily, greasy, heavy, spicy for no reason. So I think it's picking up. UK, if you go, it's already there. Unka to second khana is Indian food. The entire Gulf there, one of their core food beyond Arabic is Indian food already. Similarly, you look at states, you look at Southeast Asia, there is an increased interest with Indian food. Is it already at par with, let's say, Italian food or French food or American? No. But is it going to give them a tough competition in the time to come? Yes, definitely.
Kunal, very well said. That brings me to you, my friend, because we were talking about this. We will bring this up. And what is your take on the politics of Indian cuisine?
Well, for me, the politics of Indian cuisine is determined, like all politics, by the economics of Indian cuisine.
Absolutely.
Right? It's all about the money.
Of course.
I think one of the things we've seen with Indian food is there's a fledgling attempt to make it upmarket. Generally, wherever you go, in Britain, for example, the kebab houses or whatever, it's like, I'm short of money, it's the end of the month, let me go out there, right? Wherever you go, Indian food is kind of your entry-level food, except in Germany, where it's always been expensive for what, I don't know the economics of it, but in Germany it's been expensive.
I have found the Bengal Brisha in London or in even in smaller towns of England very expensive.
They've become expensive
Yes.
now generally.
Yes.
But they were generally,
Yeah.
pretty, the poor man's
I understand.
food kind of thing.
Yeah.
What we've seen is that slowly, because of, say, people like Gagan or whatever, you're getting to a point where it's coming into a absolute Michelin star category. Now, I have huge issues with that, and I'll tell you why. Because you're adapting Indian food to eat it in a way it's not meant to be eaten. Right? We don't eat in courses as far as, like you, both in Bengal
Yeah,
and
of
in
course,
Tamil Nadu.
yeah.
It's, the rice is put here, everything is served
Yeah.
on the side. It's like a
on
thali
the
kind
side,
of a
it's thali,
system.
yeah.
And you mix it and eat it.
Of course.
There's a completely different flavor that comes with eating with your hands. It was a Persian emperor who said this, that, eating with a fork and knife is like making love through an interpreter.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah. So, you can't. I don't agree with where that food is going. I don't like this Michelin categorization of Indian food. I think it's completely unsuited to it, in a sense. And I think we've really got to start pulling back. Thai food. Have you seen Thai food ever adapt itself to a Western setting? No. And yet they're very proud. You see Westerners adapt their settings for Thai food, not the other way around. I'm not seeing that as much because I think a lot of it has to come, and this is a generic problem with Indians, that we seek gore aadmi ka validation.
But at the same time, my dear friend, you would also agree that, through these 75 years of Azadi Ki Amrit Mahotsav that we are celebrating at Arth, a culture fest, we're also looking at a deep colonial impact which is there on Indian food, which is left. I belong, we both understand that when I belong to a city of gastronomy where continental food is celebrated like the Chinese counterparts. I'm not going to get into Chinese food right away, but the colonial impact on food or impact of world cuisine on Indian food has also been immense.
It has. So especially if you look at the colonial impact on food,
Yes.
you look at the spicing levels.
Yes.
They start going through the roof when the British arrive.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Before that, maybe for a kilo of meat, if you read all these old Farsi recipes and things like that,
Right.
it's about, say, a teaspoon and a half of spice for a kilo of meat. After the British comes, it is obscene. It's like 5-6 tablespoons. And you know why that is? In fact, you go back to the earliest Renaissance cookbook. It's by a gentleman called Scappi. He was the personal chef of the Pope, the Borgia Pope. For half a kilo, what is in modern measurements half a kilo of mushrooms, for a mushroom pie, he wants 1 whole cup of cinnamon powder, dalchini powder, and 2 cups of sugar.
Wow.
ये कौन खाएगा? मैं तो छूऊंगा भी नहीं इसे.
बाप रे
But this
बाप.
was what passed off. You know why? Because dalchini powder was so expensive and sugar was so expensive. In those days, you didn't, when you came into a lot of money, today what you do is you buy a Lamborghini, you buy a Ferrari, you buy hideous Birkin bags which won't even suit you, but they'll cost 2.5 crores. And you say bling, 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 bling kind of thing. Right? Or you...
We do Instagram feeds with that.
Yeah. In those days, the way of, announcing you have arrived instead of a Ferrari on your front porch was a lot of spices in your food. So when the British come, their thing is, oh my God, it's so cheap out here. Let me put 15 different spices where 2 will do.
Yeah.
And if you look at Anglo-Indian food and continental food,
Yes.
the level of spicing is quite incredible. It's not how they eat in Britain anymore.
It's quite monitored in a way.
It's monitored, but the complexity is quite significant.
Yes.
As opposed to, say, in Bengal, since we're talking about
Yes, of course.
in a Bengali context, doi mach,
Yeah.
which is technically only cinnamon and red chili.
Yes, and
And
yeah.
the real secret there is combining mustard oil with proper ghee.
Absolutely.
Imagine in India today, if you go run a search on how ghee is made, they'll say it's just clarified butter. It is not. First, you have to first you have to make dahi.
Yeah.
Then the dahi's malai has to be aged. Then you have to make butter. Then you have to culture the butter, and then from that you extract the ghee. It's a 3-stage fermentation process.
Absolutely.
So,
It is.
we forget that as well. So there's a lot of it that has to do with coloniality, but it's not a bad thing. I don't think we should decolonize because, there is a great deal of fun in, going crazy with your spices and putting it in there because it's fun.
It is. I'm going to come back to you again. Just one question that has always been lingering in my mind. But I want to thank Sonal and Kunal both by asking them one small question that maybe Sonal could lead on and Kunal could, add on to this. That Sonal, tell me something that food blogging is also a very important part of today's culture in cuisine. What's your take on that?
Definitely, there's a space for it. I feel like what bloggers have done, they've even made chefs bold to accept who they are, to let Indian food shine the way they have to, because they started cooking from their homes, especially during the pandemic, and as is. I have seen that a lot of chefs who were cooking in like massive modern Indian restaurants also started embracing true basic regional Indian food, thanks to so much of content being created by food content creators, which was so Indian cuisine, from the plating to the choice of recipes to all of that. So I feel they are contributing in their own little way. I would say that there are both kinds. One are the guys who are experimenting and adding on to that, and the other are the guys who are sticking to traditions, and I think both have their own audiences. So I feel that's pretty much what their contribution is to Indian food. But I would still say that for me, Indian food can be contributed much more deeply if chefs who are actually the key influencers, who are changing our mindsets about Indian food, their Instagram and all of that. I feel like if they did a more non-intimidating, more authentic piece of Indian food, I think the repercussions will be wider.
Thank you so much for that insight. And as I can see Kunal sipping into his delicious tea, Kunal, will you tell us about your experience with food bloggers and how important do you think it's an important step towards digitization of cuisine and culture? And then we'll take on the first question.
Absolutely. I think it is very important because understand, you can be the best chef or the best cook or whomsoever you are, you alone cannot document Indian food. And it'll take all of the Indians, all of them, all of their collective efforts to bring out proper documentation of how food is done or was done, or your own interpretations about food. I'll tell you why. When I joined college, and till date, the first and the foremost cookery lessons is French style of cooking. And this is the phenomena across the world. And when we started, I remember the types of knives we were studying, ye knife. And I was just thinking about it, very afraid to ask my professor, कि इसके अंदर जो मेरी घर पे मम्मी चाकू इस्तेमाल करती है वो तो है ही नहीं, तो वो क्या इस्तेमाल करती है? वो कोकोनट स्क्रैपर जो होता है वो तो दिखाया नहीं, वो जो दुरत्ती होती है, which you put it on floor, that inverted knife like a sickle, and you hold your sabzi and then you cut it, वो तो है ही नहीं. तो ये knife बिल्कुल ही अलग है. Chef's knife I've never seen in my home or my dadi or my nani. So I was to forget all of that doesn't exist, and pick up French side of cooking and learn from there, only to realize a decade later that because the French had documented each and every aspect of their food and their recipe, and they said, this is our God book, everybody will follow it. So I started searching for my God book, for my food, for my Indian identity. And to my disarray, I couldn't find any one place that I can go and have information. All my information was coming from these big restaurants or the award-winning restaurants that were there. Let's say Bukhara at one point of time was brilliant. Like everybody would talk this, the number one. So like whatever Bukhara is doing must be the best. Or let's say Dampuk must be the best because that's my connect to them. So it slowly, gradually occurred to me, no, the best of Indian food is still trapped in Indian homes, and nobody is even talking about it. And that's where I see the bloggers starting off. And at first they didn't know whether to talk about food, whether to show a recipe, whether to give a recommendation ke kaun sa khana kahan ka hai. But it all started making sense 5-6 years down the line. And in times like today, if you want to know history and geography about a spice, about a curry, about anything, like for example, the Tamilian Brahmins in Tamil Nadu, what do they eat versus the Brahmins in, let's say, in Gujarat, or let's say in Kerala? How are they different? How is the Mapilas are different from, let's say, the Nambodaris in terms of their eating habits, in terms of the culture, in terms of the same recipe, whether it's the stew that they're doing or a chicken curry that they're doing. Like you talked about that browning of meat. So there is a Vayanadan chicken curry, which defies all the science of Indian cooking. And it's chicken curry, which is just boiled and just a tempering on top, yet it tastes so good. So there are these aspects that have obviously come about because of the collective efforts of foodies from across India, people who have painstakingly put together recipes, whether it's in the form of a book, whether it is in the form of digitizing by way of talking about it as a blog or visiting a place, जैसे कोई ठेले वाला कुछ बना रहा है और किसी ने उसका एक वीडियो बना दिया. For me sitting here, I get goosebumps. Wow, I didn't even know that guy existed doing such a thing. मटके के ऊपर कोई रोटी बन रही है, कुछ किसी से बन रही है, like, wow, I have to visit there. I don't even know that existed. So each and every contribution is big. Even a small contribution, you see something and you report it कि लोग फलानी चीज यहाँ पर मिलती है, is a very big deal because that comes together. और हमारी generation को तो थोड़ा फायदा हुआ सो हुआ. आने वाली the next generation is going to pick this up, segment it, categorize it, and then use it as their means of okay, this is who we are, this is our culture, here's the book, here's it is, or here's the digital whatever CD, take this, or pen drive, or the cloud link, this is Indian food. So I think it's the process, and bloggers and every food enthusiast sitting at home, all the women of India, I think, who relentlessly cook 3 meals a day. Hum log to chefs have, we cook food for money and for glory, but the women of India, उनका बहुत अलग level पे उनका खाना और प्यार होता है. So salute to them as well.
Saluting the diaspora, bringing about that gender dynamics. Yes, I mean, women often are the free cooks and chefs who are possibly not even recognized in our culture. But coming to that, we will just take a few questions because we are short of time. The first question is, what do you think has been the impact of ready-to-eat or home-delivered food on the culture of Indian cuisine? Abhijit, will you want to take that?
Well, for me, it's been horizontal, as you can see. This is the impact of ready-to-eat or home-delivered food. But it's a gift to the world. The way we've embraced home delivery and things like that, it's a business model.
It is.
It's a business model, but it hasn't shifted consumption patterns.
Yes.
I don't think it's shifted consumption patterns, but it's created a market expansion. And it's certainly brought home a culture of eating, not out, but bahar ka khana andar, which, usually in India wasn't. Like, restaurants were never a big thing in India. Restaurants are quite modern.
Absolutely. There's a question for Sonal, if you can hear me. The question from one of our viewers is, we've replaced ghee with butter, kachi ghani as we call it, with refined oil. Are we losing our roots somewhere in the process?
Sorry, will you repeat that for me? I didn't catch it. Somewhere cracked.
replaced ghee with butter, kachi ghani as we call it, with refined oil. Are we losing our roots somewhere in the process?
No, I don't think that replacement has happened to such a large degree. Actually, I feel like, again, we are so influenced by the Gora people, the fact that they're going gung-ho about ghee. I think we've kind of started taking it more and more seriously. In fact, now in the market, I even see flavored ghee. There's tikka masala ghee, and there is ghee flavored with turmeric. So there's two Indian superfoods put together. So I don't think it's going anywhere. I think modern Indian chefs are talking about Indian traditional ingredients in such a profound way. At least a few key players in this, that I don't think this is going to die down so easily.
Thank you. Thank you for that precise answer. We will round up this session now, but Abhijit, I want you to round this up for me. And I thank my viewers and Kunal and Sonal wholeheartedly. It's been absolutely delightful to hear both of you. There's this very dear girlfriend of mine who came to one of my pop-ups. I recently celebrated I wanted to celebrate Ma's cuisine, and she never had a cookbook. My housemaid probably has kind of absorbed a bit of her style, and I wanted to celebrate that with my friends. I hosted a pop-up in a cafe in Kolkata. And so one of my lady friends came and said that, do you know, Sujoy, a lot of us express through cuisine, by cooking. Yeah. How do you look at that, Abhijit?
If you want to see the living example of that, that would be Singapore.
Yes.
Singapore is a dictatorship. There's not much in terms of art happening. The art of Singapore is food. And boy, are they good at it. They're like the Picasso, the Gauguin, the Chagall, the Kandinsky of food all combined into one little city-state. It's very much a case of us expressing mummy, our heritage, as well as our culture through our food. Let me give you a simple example. Since Kunal hasn't done any self-advertisement, let me do some advertisement for him. I want you to go check out the episode he did on Kalpasi. It's a lichen that grows on rocks. It is the key ingredient in Chettinad and Tamil food, which is practically unheard of anywhere outside that state. Right? What Sonal said about regional cooking.
Yes.
I mean, is it even regional in that? Do we have a pan-Indian cuisine in that sense? She made a very important point that Indian cuisine is the sum total of its regional cuisines.
Yes.
For me, my expression has always been my grandmother. Like for Kunal, his God book is the houses he visits. For me, it's my grandmother, and it was rasam. And Kunal, no, you do not need 15 spices. For a great rasam, you just need 4. And I was taught this by my grandmother. I don't think you can see the scars on my ear, but I learnt it with lots of ear pinching. The main thing about a rasam is it never ever comes to a boil. If it comes to a boil, it gets thrown out.
Right.
And I learnt that both by the slaps and the taste that my grandmother left on me.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Abhijit. Thank you, my viewers, my lovely viewers. Thank you very much for watching us. Talking about culture and cuisine at Arth, a Culture Fest. Thank you, Kunal. Thank you for Sonal for joining us online and giving us such beautiful and brilliant insights into the cultural evolution of cuisine. I'd like to thank Abhijit for joining us. And as I move on to the next session, I'd like to mention that you will all get to see a new link on your screens. Please join us on that link because we start a new stream. There's no dearth of, there's no point in, Yes, I would like to say that this link is for the Facebook users who will get to see the next debate and the next forum at Earth with that new link that you see on your screen for the Facebook users. And let's celebrate diversity, let's reconnect, let's rediscover, let's re-explore, and let's keep revisiting our roots and traditions. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Abhijit. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Kojo, kojo,